Whether you need to save a buck or two or would like to put your DIY skills to the test, today we have 17 pieces of DIY furniture you can make yourself. Rolling shelf made from a crate. Find and mark the center of your shelf. Cut down 2 boards and screw them into the center that you just marked. Snugly fit a board over your 2 shelf brackets. Flip your crate over and install 4 caster wheels. Now you can load up your shelf with books or decor and easily move it around the room. X-style table. For this project, you'll need 2 of the same size boards. Find the center of each board and make a 2 centimeter wide mark that runs about halfway down. Then use a router to cut out your notch. Connect the notches together to form the table. Place your table beside your favorite reading chair and load it up with books or magazines. Crates turn into a bookshelf. Gather 6 wooden crates, stain them in your color of choice, and allow the stain to dry. Arrange the crates to create a long bookshelf and then attach them with wood glue and clamps. Allow the glue to dry overnight. Drill pilot holes where the crates meet and then use screws to reinforce their bond. You can orient your shelf vertically or horizontally and add your favorite books and decor. Spinning coffee table. For this project, you'll need a wooden cable drum, paint, and wooden dowels. Begin by painting your dowels and cable drum in your desired color. Once the paint is dry, use a drill bit to create holes big enough for your dowels to fit through. Attach the dowels with wood glue at the bottom. Repeat all the way around the drum. Flip the drum over and attach your hardware. Now you can load up your table with plants or books. Tiered produce holder. Materials for this project include 9 pieces of 15 centimeter by 45 centimeter wood, 6 pieces of 15 centimeter by 19 centimeter wood, 2 pieces of 10 by 80 centimeter wood, and 4 pieces of 4 centimeter by 20 centimeter wood. Use your 15 by 40 centimeter and 15 by 19 centimeter wood to create 3 rectangular boxes. Create pilot holes and then screw the wood together. Use one of your boxes as a template to line up your longest boards and then cut off the excess at a diagonal. Stain all wood and allow it to dry overnight. Screw the 4 by 20 centimeter pieces of wood to the long boards on the flat cut side. These will act as feet. Line up the boxes with the long board, evenly spacing them out. Attach with screws. Repeat on the opposite side. Position your produce holder in the kitchen and add your favorite fruits and vegetables. Wooden headboard. For this project, you'll need 4 pine boards that measure 30 by 200 centimeters and 2 boards that measure 30 by 100 centimeters. Begin by staining the boards in your desired color, making sure to coat the edges. Once the stain dries, flip the boards over and attach them with screws to create the headboard. On the front of the headboard, attach a bracket and install sconces. Place your new headboard behind your bed and enjoy. Shape-shifting coffee table. Place 4 caster wheels on each side table. Connect the tables with a hinge. On the opposite side, add a lock. With the table finished, you can use it as one long piece or fold it to fit into corners. DIY wood ottoman. To get started, gather 1 square board that measures 40 by 40 centimeters. Cover the board with hot glue and then add a square piece of foam on top. Wrap the board in fabric, securing it with staples on the back. Next, grab a board measuring 48 by 44 centimeters and attach your cushion to it using wood glue. To create the base, you'll need 4 boards that each measure 44 by 44 centimeters. Assemble them into a square and secure them with wood glue and nails. Attach a 48 by 44 centimeter board to the bottom and then stain the base to your desired shade. Add wheels to the bottom board. You can now add your top cushion to your rolling ottoman. Use the inside as storage and the top as seating or a footrest. Rolling cubbies. Grab a board that's long enough to house 2 wooden cubbies. Stain the board and allow the stain to dry. Add wheels to the bottom of the wood. Flip the board over and attach 2 crates with wood glue. Add a board to the top of the crate. Now you can fill your cubbies with baskets or organizers. DIY bucket stool. Saw the top off of an old 5-gallon bucket and sand the edges smooth. Use a ruler to mark 3 evenly spaced sections around the bucket. Drill holes into your marks. Mark your large dowel rods and use a drill to create holes in the marks. Screw the dowels into place. Flip the bucket over and apply glue and a large piece of foam. Lay out a large piece of fabric padding and glue it to the sides of your bucket. Cut a piece of fabric for the top and then the sides. Use twine and glue to make a smooth hem on the bottom of the fabric. Then glue down the flaps of the top piece. When the glue is dry, fit the fabric over your bucket. Tie the twine at the bottom. Now you can enjoy your cozy new stool. Easy to make stool. Grab a piece of wood and cut it down to the desired size of your stool's seat. Then cover it in glue and attach a piece of foam. Mark for legs in each corner and then use your drill bit to create pilot holes. Attach the legs. Wrap the seat in fluffy fabric and attach it to the bottom with staples. Use your new stool for your vanity or desk. Crate coffee table. Grab 4 old crates and stain or paint them to your desired color. Arrange the crates into a square shape. Attach them to one another with screws. Secure 4 caster wheels to the bottom of the crate. Now you can use your new creation as a coffee table and shelving system. Padded bookcase bench. Cut down a 2 cm thick wooden board to fit lengthwise over the side of your bookcase. Add foam and then fabric. Wrap the fabric under the board and secure it with staples. Leave your bookcase lengthwise and use the top as a bench. Mid-century modern coffee table. For this project, determine the size of the table you'd like and find 2 boards to fit those dimensions. Use 2 shorter boards as braces to keep the table together. Add 3 screws to the top and bottom of the shorter boards. Stain your tabletop and let it dry. Attach hairpin legs to each corner of your tabletop. Now you have the perfect coffee table to add to your living room. DIY shoe cubby. For this project, you'll start with a 57 by 27 centimeter board. Use a tape measure to find and mark the center. From the center, create a 2 centimeter line halfway up the board and notch it out with a router. Grab a 27 by 27 centimeter board and create a 2 centimeter notch in it. Apply adhesive paper to both boards. Then link the boards together through their notches. For the next step, you'll need one full-length 60 by 30 centimeter board and a second the same size that's cut in half. Apply wood glue to the edge of the long board and attach the shorter pieces. Run wood glue along the back of the board and snugly secure a 57 by 30 centimeter piece of wood. Then slide in the shelf you made in the first step. Attach legs to the bottom. Flip the piece over and stabilize it by installing screws at the side. For the final step, layer foam and fabric over a 60 by 30 centimeter board and secure with staples. Apply wood glue to the top of the shoe cubby and place the cushion over it. You can now store shoes in your piece or use it as a bench. Here are two more interesting projects from our collaborator, Glenn from DIY Creators.
In this video, I'm going to make a modern nightstand, and you'll need one 1x12 by 48 inches piece of lumber. And you'll also need four 1x2 measuring at 48 inches long. To begin, I cut off the rough end on the piece of lumber. To make these cuts, I'm going to use a circular saw crosscut jig. I'll place all the dimensions in the video description. The first cut I'll make will be for the bottom since it is the largest piece. Then I'll cut the two sides and then the top. And to make the legs, I'll start by measuring the back side of the leg, and that's 22 inches long. And while I'm cutting that, I'll make the second one for the second leg. Next, I'm going to cut the top part of the leg, and one side is going to be made at a 22-degree cut. Now I'm going to use the one I just cut as a template to make the second cut. The next cut will be the bottom of the leg, and that too will get a 22-degree cut on one end. The final cut will be for the front part of the legs, and both ends will be at a 22-degree cut. Now I did cut the front part of the leg longer than it should be to give me room for error. And now to fine tune the front part of the legs, I'm going to use a framing square to square up the outside and then double check on the inside to make sure everything was straight. Next, I'll mark the spot that I need to cut. So most of these joints will be made up of dowels, and I'll use a dowel jig to make the holes. Now after the holes are drilled, it should look something like this. Now I don't use dowels much, but in a situation like this, dowels provide a strong joint and you're not able to see any screws. Now to transfer these holes over to the next piece, I'm going to use these dowel pins. Now press it up against the wood, and these should mark the location of where you should drill your holes. This makes it a whole lot easier on where to drill the holes. Now my suggestion is you don't use a regular freehand bit to just drill these holes. You want to have a bit with a collar, or you tape it on where to stop so you don't go all the way through. Now you'll want to test your joints and make sure it fits together perfectly before you add the glue. I only put the dowels on the back side of the legs. Being that the front is at an angle, it makes it a little difficult to put the dowels in. It can be done, but it's a little more time consuming. In this case, I'm going to use my nail guns to nail the front on. Now you want to check your squaring again just to make sure you're on the right track. Now using the glue and the nail gun, that would make this joint pretty strong as well. And now I'm going to add clamps to hold all the joints together while they dry, and then I'll do the same thing for the next leg. And now to make the top of the nightstand, it's going to look something like this when it's done. And now I'm going to mark all the locations for the dowels. So at this point, I've drilled out all the holes for the dowels. I'm going to add glue, then I'm going to install the dowels. I started by placing all the dowels in the bottom, then I went to the side. Then after I hammered that down, I started with the top. If you notice, I had a 5th dowel on the top so that I had added strength, being that the top is suspended. And now I'll add the final side. Now the piece of lumber I'm using do have a slight warp to it. I don't have a joiner or the right tools to straighten this out, so in this case I'm counting on the clamps that it can pull the middle in and close up the gap. Now add a lot of clamps, check for squaring, and use a wet rag to remove all the glue squeeze out. Now I'll use some wood filler to fill in the nail holes, and then I'll also add some at the joints. Now as you can see, I flooded the top with wood filler as well, and this is to help hide all the imperfection. Then I'll take the sander and smooth all that out. Now my first pass through with the sander, I use 150 grit, and for the final stage of sanding, I came back with a 220 grit, and that should help smooth it out and ready for finish. And now I'm going to apply paint primer, which should help the paint stick even better. Now as the primer is drying, I'm going to move on to adding stain on the legs. I'm using a golden pecan stain. To apply the stain, I'm going to use a rag method. Pretty simple, just use the rag to apply the stain and then use a clean rag to remove the stain. And ideally you want to use a rag that's lint free. And for the final finish, I add 2 coats of white latex paint. And to add a layer of protection, I'm going to use a wipe-on poly, which you should also use a lint-free rag. And after the first layer dried, I use a 220 grit sandpaper, lightly sand that, then I apply the second coat. And now I'll mark a few mounting holes to attach the legs to the top. And since I only had 1-inch screws, I'm going to drill out the mounting area just enough so the screws can go through both pieces. And now to attach the legs, I'm going to offset the legs by 3/4 of an inch, going from the sides and also on the back. So if you notice, I do have a sheet of plywood laying down, and that helps with the offset as well. Now clamp the legs in place and tighten the screws up. You also want to pre-drill the hole before you install the screws. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to subscribe to Home Edit for more how-to videos like this one. And I'll start by ripping these pieces down on the table saw. Being that all the pieces don't seem to be the same width, I'm going to make sure I take off 1 cut off each side first. Then I'll make some adjustment on the table saw, and then I'll flip the board around and then make 1 final cut just to make sure that I have straight edges on both sides. And after all the pieces are cut, I'm going to set up a quick jig on my table saw so that I can get some consistency and cut in 45-degree angles. And making these miter joints is still a bit tricky even though you're setting it up on a table saw, because you have to keep this perfectly aligned so that we can get some tight miter joints. If miter joint seems to be a bit intimidating, you can always just use regular butt joints in this situation. And for these smaller pieces, I find it a bit easier using my circular saw. And with all the pieces cut, we should have 4 pieces. We should have the 2 sides and also the top and bottom. Now it will be a bit tricky to get to the inside and sand once this box is already assembled together. So prior to assembling, I'm just going to sand all the pieces down as smooth as possible. And I'll start with 120, then I'll move up to 220 grit sandpaper as final. The wood glue will play a major role when it comes to holding this entire coffee table together. You want to make sure you put wood glue on both pieces of the miter joint. Before nailing or screwing, depending on the way you put this together, you want to make sure that your joints are squared. The end result will reflect the way you start, so be sure you take your time and get this piece right. The wood glue will be doing the majority of the bonding. The nails is just a placeholder right now so we can put the box together and move on. And once this side is done, you can move on to the opposite side and do the same thing. And after the 3 sides is all glued together, I'm going to allow enough time for the glue to dry before I come back and add the final piece. And to add the final piece, I'm going to use the same process that was done previously. And since we're working with mitered corners here, the band clamp seems to work well, especially when trying to put pressure on all the corners. So I've given enough time for everything to dry, and now I'm going to come back with some wood filler and fill in all the nail heads. And if you happen to have any gaps in your mitered joint, this is probably the time to add some wood filler as well. And after the wood filler is dry, just hit it once more with a sander for the final time. Then we'll take a rag, a damp rag, and wipe the surface to remove any sand dust. I actually like the light color of the wood, but if you want to stain it as well, you can totally go for it. But to put a protective coat on it, I'm going to use polyacrylic as my final top coat. As long as you follow the instructions on the can, you should be fine. In this case, I used 3 coats of the polyacrylic, and in between each coat, I used a 300 grit sandpaper and 400 on the final one. And as far as the in-between coats, I just used a hand sander and I just followed the grain on the wood, and that was pretty much it. Now, of course, you can always make the legs you desire or purchase the legs you desire, but for this project, I really like the way the hairpin legs look, so this is what I went with for this project. I used a combination square to make sure I placed all the legs in the same spot and everything looked consistent. Each leg was placed an inch in from each side. Just pre-drill your hole and install the screws. Believe it or not, that's it for this one, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to Home Edit for more content like this in the future.